The resin on the bow was sticky against her thumb, a grounding sensation in a world that felt increasingly ephemeral. Alina Volkov closed her eyes, letting the vibration of the cello's C string resonate through her sternum, vibrating against her ribs like a second, slower heartbeat. The final movement of Elgar's concerto in E minor. It was a piece made of weeping, of a sorrow so profound it felt like drowning in cold water. When she drew the final note, letting it hang in the stale air of the practice room until it dissolved into silence, her hands were trembling. Not from exertion, but from the hunger that had been gnawing at her stomach for 2 days. Seoul was a city of neon lights and glass towers, a glittering promise of the future, but for a scholarship student from St. Petersburg whose funding had just been slashed, it was a mouth waiting to swallow her whole. She packed the instrument with the care of a mother swaddling an infant. The cello was worth more than her life. It was a Guarneri copy, gifted to her by the anonymous patron who had paid for her tuition, her apartment, her existence for the last 3 years. The shadow patron, she called him. She had never met him, never seen a face, only seen the initials K.S. signed on the typed letters that arrived with the monthly checks. "You are playing with too much fear, Alina," her professor had told her that afternoon. "You play as if you are apologizing for taking up space." She walked out of the Seoul Art Center and into the biting November rain. It was a cold rain, the kind that did not just wet the skin but soaked into the marrow, turning blood to slush. The wind whipped her hair across her face, blinding her. To save money on the subway, she took the shortcut through the narrow alleys of Siachodong. It was a labyrinth of shadows behind the high-end restaurants and galleries, where the smell of garbage mixed with the exhaust of expensive imported cars. The atmospheric shift begins here. The safety of the art world transitions to the brutality of the underworld. Her boots splashed through puddles that looked like oil slicks under the flickering street lamps. She adjusted the heavy case on her back, her shoulders screaming in protest. The alley was dead silent, save for the rhythmic drumming of the rain against the corrugated metal roofs. Then, a sound. Not the chaotic noise of the city, but something precise. Thwip. Thwip. Like a finger snapping against wet leather. Alina froze. Her breath hitched in her throat, a jagged shard of ice. She was standing at the T-junction of the alley. To her right, beneath the awning of a closed delivery bay, 2 men were standing. One was on his knees, his head bowed, weeping silently. The other stood over him. He was tall, dressed in a charcoal suit that looked like it had been cut from the night sky itself. He held a pistol with a suppressor attached, a long, cylindrical extension that looked alien and terrifyingly professional. Alina's brain screamed at her to move, to run, to dissolve into the brickwork. But her body had betrayed her. Her legs were lead, rooted to the asphalt. The somatic terror hit her first, a cold wave crashing over her scalp, sending prickles of electricity down her spine. Her stomach dropped, a physical sensation of falling from a great height. The standing man did not hesitate. He did not monologue. He did not pause. He simply adjusted his aim and fired. Thwip. The kneeling man collapsed forward. The back of his head disintegrated. Alina gasped. It was a small sound, barely a whisper, swallowed by the rain. But the man in the suit heard it. He turned his head with the slow, predatory grace of a jungle cat spotting movement in the grass. He looked at her. Under the harsh halo of a security light, his face was illuminated. He was devastatingly handsome, with high cheekbones that could cut glass and eyes so dark they seemed to absorb the light around them. There was no surprise in those eyes. No panic. Just a cold, calculating recognition. He stepped over the body, his expensive Italian leather shoes splashing into the pool of blood that was rapidly mixing with the rainwater, swirling into a dark, metallic violet. Alina scrambled backward, her cello case hitting the brick wall behind her with a hollow thud. Run. The command finally fired in her brain. She turned, her boots slipping on the wet pavement. She made it 3 steps before the air was knocked out of her. A heavy arm wrapped around her throat from behind, hard as an iron bar. Another hand, wearing a leather glove, clamped over her mouth. She was lifted off her feet, her legs kicking uselessly at the air, the cello case weighing her down like an anchor. She could not breathe. The arm tightened, compressing her windpipe. Her lungs burned, a fire spreading through her chest as the oxygen was cut off. Panic clawed at her throat. She could smell him now, not the metallic tang of blood, but something richer. Sandalwood. Rain. And the faint, smoky scent of gunpowder. "Shoo," a voice whispered against her ear. It was low, smooth, and terrifyingly calm. "Do not fight it, Alina." He knew her name. The shock of it stopped her struggling for a fraction of a second. How did the killer in the alley know the name of a nobody cello student? "That's it," he murmured, the vibration of his chest pressing against her back. "Sleep now." She felt a sharp pinch in her neck, like a hornet sting. Cold fluid flooded her veins, turning her blood to ice water. The alley began to tilt sideways. The rain slowed down, the droplets hanging in the air like suspended diamonds. The gray concrete rushed up to meet her. The last thing she felt was the man's hand catching her head before it hit the ground, cradling her skull with a gentleness that was more terrifying than the violence. Waking up was not a gradual process. It was a violent return to the body. Alina gasped, sitting bolt upright, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird trying to break the cage. Her vision swam, blurred shapes coalescing slowly into focus. She was not in the alley. She was not in a hospital. She was not in a police station. She was in a bed that was larger than her entire apartment. The sheets were silk, cool and slippery against her skin. The room was vast, dominated by floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out onto a wall of mist and rain. The light was gray, the eternal twilight of a storm. Alina scrambled out of the bed, her legs wobbling like a newborn foal's. She was wearing a silk nightgown she did not own. It was a pale, ghostly blue. Panic rose in her throat, a sour bile. Where are my clothes? Who changed me? She spun around, taking in the room. Minimalist. Expensive. Dark wood and slate gray stone. It felt like a mausoleum designed by an architect who hated warmth. On a velvet armchair in the corner, her cello case sat. Unharmed. Pristine. She ran to it, dropping to her knees, her hands shaking as she undid the latches. It was there. The wood gleamed under the recessed lighting. Seeing it calmed the erratic thumping of her heart by a fraction. She moved to the windows. The glass was thick, surely bulletproof. She looked down and vertigo seized her. She was high up. Very high up. Below her, the mountain dropped away into a dense forest of pine and fog. In the far distance, barely visible through the clouds, was the faint, gray sprawl of Seoul. She was in a fortress in the sky. She tried the door. Locked. Of course. She backed away, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to stop the tremors that were racking her body. Think, Alina. Think. You saw a murder. You were taken. The door handle turned. The sound was loud in the silence of the room. The latch clicked, a mechanical, final sound. The door swung open, and he walked in. The man from the alley. He was no longer wearing the blood-spattered suit. He was dressed in casual wear that cost more than her tuition, a black cashmere turtleneck that hugged the broad lines of his shoulders, and dark gray trousers. He looked domestic. Relaxed. As if he had not executed a man 12 hours ago. He held a silver tray with a porcelain teapot and a single cup. You reawake, he said. His voice was the same low rumble she had heard before she lost consciousness. It wrapped around her, raising gooseflesh on her arms. I was worried the dosage was too high. You are smaller than you look. Alina backed up until her legs hit the edge of the bed. Stay away from me. Her voice was a croak, dry and cracked. He did not stop. He walked to a low table by the window and set the tray down with a soft clink. Tea. Chamomile and honey. It will help with the nausea. Who are you? She demanded, though the fear made the words sound weak. What do you want? He turned to face her, his hands clasped loosely behind his back. Up close, he was even more striking. There was a symmetry to his face that was almost unnatural. But his eyes, they were ancient. Tired. My name is Kang Seo-jun, he said politely. And as for what I want, I have already taken it. He picked up a remote control from the table and pointed it at a flat-screen television mounted on the far wall. The screen flared to life. It was a news channel. Breaking news. The headline scrolled in bold red Korean characters. Alina's Korean was fluent after 3 years, but she had to read it twice to comprehend the words. Foreign student found dead in Han River tragedy. The screen changed to a photo. It was her student ID photo. The reporter's voice was professional, detached. Alina Volkov, a 23-year-old cello student at the Korea National University of Arts, was found dead early this morning. Police suspect she slipped on the wet embankment near the Banpo Bridge during last night's storm and drowned. Her personal effects, including her ID, were found on the body. Alina's knees gave out. She sank onto the edge of the bed, staring at her own face on the screen. "No," she whispered. That's not possible. "It is a closed casket funeral, obviously," Seo Jun said, his tone conversational. "Water damage is terrible for the features. The embassy has been notified. Without family to claim the body, the cremation will be handled by the state tomorrow." He clicked the remote, and the screen went black. "Why?" She looked up at him, tears blurring her vision. "Why did you do this?" "Because you saw something you were not supposed to," he said simply. He took a step toward her. "Normally, witnesses are removed. Permanently. A bullet is cheap, clean, and final." He stopped 3 feet away from her. Close enough that she could smell that sandalwood scent again. It made her stomach churn with a confused mix of terror and familiarity. "But I could not shoot you, Alina." "Why?" she choked out. "Because you're not a monster." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. It did not reach his eyes. "Oh, I am a monster. Make no mistake. I run the chaotic elements of the Kong Corporation. I clean up the messes my family makes. The man you saw last night was stealing from us. He paid the price." He reached out. Alina flinched, pressing herself back into the mattress. But he did not strike her. He reached past her and touched the neck of the cello case sitting on the chair. "I could not shoot you," he continued softly, his fingers tracing the curve of the case, "because I have invested too much money in you to let it go to waste." Alina froze. The air in the room seemed to solidify, pressing in on her eardrums. "Invested?" Seo Jun turned his gaze back to her. 3 years of tuition. The apartment in Mapo-gu. The living stipend. The Guarneri copy sitting in that case. The blood drained from Alina's face, leaving her lightheaded. The patron. K.S. Kong Seo Jun, he finished. The world tilted on its axis. The kind stranger who had saved her from poverty, the anonymous angel who had believed in her music, was the executioner standing in front of her. "You," she breathed. "You've been watching me." "Listening to you," he corrected. "I attended every recital. Sat in the back. You play with a desperation that is captivating. It soothes me." He stepped closer, invading her personal space. His presence was overwhelming, a physical weight that made it hard to expand her lungs. He placed a hand on the mattress, leaning down until his face was level with hers. "I have been waiting for the right moment to introduce myself," he whispered. "To collect my investment. Fate, it seems, forced my hand early." "You see, not keep me here," Alina said, her voice shaking with rage and fear. "I'm a person. Not an investment. To the world, you are a corpse, Alina," he said coldly. "You have no passport. No identity. No friends powerful enough to look for you. You exist only because I allow it." He reached out and, with shocking gentleness, tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. His fingers were warm, rough calluses against her soft skin. The somatic response was instant, a shiver that started at her neck and raced down to her toes. Her body betrayed her fear, leaning infinitesimally into the touch before she jerked away. "Get away from me." She shoved at his chest. It was like shoving a marble statue. He did not budge. He just caught her wrist. His grip was iron. Not painful, but absolute. He held her hand there, pressed against the black cashmere over his heart. She could feel the steady, slow beat of it. "This house is isolated," he said, his eyes locking onto hers. "The walls are soundproof. The guards are loyal only to me. You have everything you need here. Food, warmth, your instrument." "I am a prisoner," she spat. "You are a guest who cannot leave," he corrected. "There is a difference." He released her wrist and straightened up, buttoning his jacket. The mask of domesticity slipped back into place, covering the predator beneath. "Drink your tea. Dinner will be served at 7. I expect you to be dressed." He turned and walked toward the door. "And if I refuse?" she called out, her voice rising in hysteria. "If I scream? If I starve myself?" Seo Jun paused at the threshold. He did not look back. "Then the world will have been right," he said softly. "And Alina Volkov really will be dead." The heavy oak door slammed shut. The lock clicked. Alina stared at the wood, the silence of the room rushing back in to crush her. She looked at the tea, steam rising in a delicate spiral. She looked at the window, the rain weeping against the glass. She looked at her cello. Her savior. Her captor. Her chest cracked open, a fissure of pure despair. She curled her knees to her chest, buried her face in the silk, and screamed a soundless, terrifying scream that no one but the monster in the other room would ever hear. Time in the glass house did not pass in hours or minutes, it passed in the movement of light across the floorboards and the slow, suffocating accumulation of silence. 3 weeks. 21 days since Alina Volkov had died in the Han River. 21 days since she had been reborn as a ghost haunting the corridors of Kong Seo Jun's mountain fortress. Winter had descended on the mountain with a vengeance. The world outside the bulletproof glass was a monochrome nightmare of white snow and black pine, erased by blinding squalls. Inside, the air was always perfectly temperature-controlled, smelling of expensive cedar polish and the underlying, metallic scent of isolation. Alina sat in the center of the vast living room, her cello between her knees. The N-pin dug into the Persian rug, anchoring her to the floor while her mind threatened to float away into the gray static of captivity. Again, Seo Jun's voice drifted from the shadows of the mezzanine. Alina's hand cramped around the bow. Her fingertips were raw, the calluses peeling. "I'm tired, Seo Jun." The Shostakovich. Second movement. He did not raise his voice. He never did. He did not have to. His authority was a physical weight in the room, heavy as gravity. "It requires aggression, Alina. You are playing with resignation. I want to hear your anger." She looked up. He was leaning against the railing above, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He wore the uniform of her captivity, dark, soft fabrics that made him look like a shadow that had learned to wear clothes. He watched her with that terrifying, hungry focus, like a man starving to death watching someone bake bread. "I am not your MP3 player," she snapped, the sudden flare of heat in her chest surprising her. "No," he agreed, descending the stairs with a fluid, silent grace. "You are my conscience." He stopped in front of her. He smelled of cold air and tobacco, a sharp contrast to the sterile warmth of the house. He had been outside again. He went out almost every night, vanishing into the storm, and returned before dawn smelling of violence. "Play," he commanded softly. "Please." The please was the worst part. It was a weapon wrapped in velvet. It acknowledged that she had a choice, while simultaneously reminding her that she had none. Alina set the bow to the string. She closed her eyes and let the anger take over. She poured the frustration of the locked doors, the humiliation of the tracked meals, the terror of his proximity into the wood. The cello screamed. The notes were jagged, discordant, ugly, and beautiful. She sawed at the strings until her arm burned, until her breath came in short, sharp gasps, until the music was a physical assault on the silence. When she finished, slashing the bow through the air for the final silence, her chest was heaving. Sweat trickled down her spine. She opened her eyes. Seo Jun was kneeling in front of her. He was so close she could see the flecks of gold in his obsidian eyes. He was not looking at the cello. He was looking at her face, his expression rapt, almost devout. "There she is," he whispered. He reached out. Alina flinched, her body remembering the alley, the needle, the darkness. But he did not grab her. His hand hovered near her cheek, feeling the heat radiating off her flushed skin without touching it. "You are so alive," he murmured. "It burns to look at you." "Then let me go," she whispered, her voice trembling. "If you admire the life in me, why are you burying me here?" His expression hardened, the vulnerability snapping shut like a steel trap. He stood up, towering over her once more. "Because out there, you are fragile. A porcelain cup in a room full of hammers." He turned away, walking toward the wet bar. "And I have too many enemies who would love to shatter you just to see me bleed." "Who are you trying to convince?" Alina challenged, her grip on the cello neck tightening until her knuckles turned white. "Me. Or yourself." He did not answer. He just poured another drink, the crystal decanter clinking against the glass, a lonely sound in the cavernous room. The shift happened 4 nights later. It started with a disruption in the rhythm. Usually, the house ran on a silent, invisible clockwork. Meals appeared. Laundry vanished. The guards, faceless men in suits, stayed on the perimeter, visible only as silhouettes against the snow. But that night, the silence broke. Alina was in her room, reading a book she had read 3 times already, when the perimeter alarms did not sound, but the house shuddered. Not an earthquake. A slam. A heavy, metal impact from the garage levels below. Then, shouting. Muffled, urgent voices in Korean. Alina's heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Opportunity. She ran to the door. Unlocked. It was always unlocked now, he knew she had nowhere to go. She slipped into the hallway. The lights were dim to their night setting. She crept toward the staircase, her bare feet silent on the hardwood. Below, in the foyer, chaos was unraveling the perfect order of Co Jun's world. 3 men were dragging a 4th through the main entrance. The snow swirled in behind them, a white vortex invading the sanctuary. Blood, bright, arterial red, splashed onto the pristine white marble floor. It looked shocking, like paint thrown on a canvas. The men being dragged was Co Jun. Alina gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. The sound was small, but in the sudden quiet of the foyer, it was a gunshot. The guards looked up, their hands flying to their weapons. No. Co Jun barked. The command was wet, gurgling. He was slumped between 2 of his men, his face the color of ash. His left hand was pressed to his side, and blood was pulsing between his fingers, soaking his white shirt, turning it into a grotesque crimson map. He looked up at the landing. His eyes found hers. They were hazy, unfocused, but the recognition was instant. "Go back to your room," he wheezed. "He's losing too much blood, boss," one of the guards, a giant named Minho, said urgently. "We need to get you to the clinic." "No clinic," Co Jun gritted out, his knees buckling. "Too risky." They re-watching the roads. "Bring the kit." "Upstairs." "Boss, the bullet is, do as I say." The shout tore out of him, followed immediately by a ragged cough that sprayed blood onto his chin. Alina did not think. Logic told her to run. Logic told her that while they were distracted, she could bolt for the open door, into the snow, into the night. But her traitorous body moved forward. She descended the stairs, her eyes locked on the red stain spreading across his torso. "Put him in the master bedroom," she said. Her voice was steady, a stranger's voice. "Minho, get the kit. Do you have coagulant?" "Epinephrine." The guard stared at her, stunned. "Move," she screamed. They moved. The master bedroom smelled of copper and sterilized alcohol. Co Jun lay on the bed, his shirt cut away. The wound was ugly, a jagged tear just above his hip bone. The bullet had gone through, but it had torn something vital on the way. Alina's hands were covered in his blood. It was hot, sticky, and terrifyingly real. It was not the abstract violence of the alley, it was intimate. She was elbow deep in the monster's mortality. "You reshaking," Co Jun whispered. He was conscious, barely. The pain must have been blinding, but he lay perfectly still, his eyes tracking her face as she worked. Shut up, Alina hissed. She threaded the suture needle. She had never stitched a person before, only old fabric, but she knew the theory. She had to. The guard, Minho, was useless, his hands were too big, too shaky. Do not die, she muttered, piercing the skin. You do not get to die and leave me here trapped with your goons. He hissed through his teeth as she pulled the thread tight. Is that the only reason? Alina did not answer. She focused on the wound, closing the red mouth that was trying to swallow his life. Her stomach churned, bile rising in her throat, but she swallowed it down. Why am I doing this? The question screamed in her mind. I should let him bleed out. I should let him die. But the thought of the light going out of those obsidian eyes, it terrified her more than his threats. It was a sickness, she realized. A rot in her soul. He had become her entire world, and without him, the world was just empty snow. Done, she breathed, tying off the final stitch. She slumped back, her hands trembling violently now that the adrenaline was fading. Minho finished bandaging the wound and stepped back, bowing low. I will secure the perimeter, boss. The Vipers, they would not get this close again. Get out, Co. Jun rasped. The guard left, closing the door softly. Silence returned to the room, heavier than before. Alina stood up to leave, to wash the blood from her skin, but Co. Jun's hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. His grip was weak, lacking its usual iron strength, but she stopped instantly. Why? He asked. His voice was a wreck, rough with pain. Alina looked down at him. He looked younger like this. Stripped of the suit, the armor, the arrogance. Just a man bleeding on a silk sheet. Because I'm a doctor's daughter, she lied. Her father had been a drunk factory worker. Because I'm not you. I do not watch people die. He pulled on her hand, urging her closer. She resisted for a second, then let him pull her down until she was sitting on the edge of the bed. You could have run, he murmured. The door was open. I would have frozen to death in 10 minutes. Liar. He reached up, his bloody fingers brushing against her cheek, leaving a streak of crimson on her pale skin. It looked like a war paint. Or a claim. You stayed, he whispered, his thumb tracing her lower lip. The sensation sent a jolt of electricity straight to her core, making her thighs clench. You saved the monster. Maybe I wanted to save the investment, she shot back, her voice shaking. Co. Jun laughed, a low, pained sound. Touché. His eyes drifted shut, the exhaustion finally claiming him. His hand slipped from her face, falling limply onto the mattress. But his fingers were still curled, as if trying to hold onto her even in sleep. Alina sat there for a long time, watching his chest rise and fall. She looked at the blood on her hands. His blood. She raised her hand to her face, touching the spot where he had marked her. She was in hell. She knew that. But looking at him, broken and breathing because of her, she realized with a dawning horror that she was no longer just a prisoner. She was an accomplice. The truce that followed was fragile, built on the shifting sands of his recovery. For a week, Alina became his nurse. She brought him food. She changed his bandages. She played the cello for him while he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling with brooding intensity. The power dynamic shifted. He was dependent on her. He could not chase her. He could not intimidate her with his physical presence. And in that space, the conversations changed. Who are the Vipers? She asked one evening, peeling an apple for him. A rival syndicate, he said. New money. Messy. They deal in things my family forbids. Human trafficking. Synthetics. And you are the moral criminal. She scoffed, handing him a slice. I am the necessary evil, he corrected. The Kong Corporation maintains order. We are the dam holding back the flood. The Vipers, they are the water wanting to drown everything. He looked at her, his gaze intense. That night in the alley, the men I killed was selling information to them. Routes. Safe houses. He was crying, Alina said softly. He was crying because he got caught. Not because he was sorry. Co. Jun took the apple slice, his fingers brushing hers. Betrayal is the only sin I cannot forgive, Alina. Remember that. The warning hung in the air, cold and sharp. Is that why you kept me? She asked. Because you think I would not betray you. I kept you because you are the only thing in my life that is not stained, he said. When you play, the noise in my head stops. You are my silence. I am a person, Co June, she said, her voice cracking. Not a sedative. You are both. The bubble burst 2 days later. Alina was in the kitchen, making tea, when she saw it. A phone. Min-ho had left it on the counter while he went to check the perimeter sensors. It was a sleek, black smartphone. Unlocked. The screen glowed with a map application. Alina's heart stopped, then restarted at double speed. She looked around. Empty. Co June was in his study, supposedly working. The other guards were outside. She reached out, her hand trembling. She grabbed the phone. Her thumb hovered over the screen. Who to call? The police. The embassy. Co June owns the police, a voice in her head whispered. The embassy thinks you are dead. She opened the browser. Email. She logged into her old university account. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. She drafted a single email to the only person she thought might actually look for her, Park Ji-hoon, a fellow student who had been in love with her for years. Subject, not dead. Body, Ji-hoon. I am alive. I am being held at a house in the mountains north of Bukhansan. High elevation. Glass walls. The man is Co June. Please. Do not go to the police. Go to the press. Go to everyone. Help me. Alina. She hit send. Sent. She quickly deleted the sent mail, wiped the history, and placed the phone back exactly where it was. She turned around, her heart hammering so hard she thought she would vomit. Co June was standing in the doorway. He was leaning heavily on a cane, his face pale, but his eyes were two black holes. Did you do it? He asked quietly. Alina froze. I was just getting water. He limped into the room. The sound of the cane hitting the tile was a rhythmic condemnation. Click. Step. Click. Step. He walked past her to the counter. He picked up the phone. He did not check it. He just weighed it in his hand. I told you, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. Betrayal is the only sin. I want to go home, she wept, backing away. Please, Co June. I want my life back. You have no life back there. He roared, the sudden violence making him wince in pain. He gripped the edge of the counter, his knuckles white. Ji-hoon cannot save you. He is a boy. A child playing a cello. What do you think will happen when he gets that email? Alina stopped breathing. You knew. I own the network this phone connects to, Alina. Every packet of data passes through my servers. He looked at her with a profound, crushing disappointment. I tried to keep you safe. I tried to keep the darkness out. But you just invited it in. The phone buzzed in his hand. Then again. Then a continuous vibration. Co June looked at the screen. His expression shifted from anger to something far more terrifying, alertness. He answered the phone, putting it on speaker. Speak, he commanded. Boss, Min-ho's voice crackled, frantic and loud. We have a breach. Multiple vehicles coming up the access road. Heavy armor. It's the Vipers. They must have tracked a signal. Alina's blood turned to ice. Tracked a signal. Her email. She had not just called for help. She had lit a beacon. Co June looked at her. There was no, I told you so, in his eyes. Only a grim, lethal resolve. How long? Co June asked. 2 minutes. They re-breaching the main gate. Initiate Protocol 0, Co June ordered. Lock down the residence. He hung up and threw the phone against the wall. It shattered. He turned to Alina. She was shaking, tears streaming down her face. I did not know. I did not mean. It does not matter now, he said. He moved toward her, ignoring his cane, ignoring his pain. He grabbed her arm, his grip bruising. You wanted the world, Alina. He pulled her close, his body radiating a terrifying heat. Congratulations. The world is here. And it has brought guns. The house lights died. Red emergency mood lighting bathed the kitchen in the color of blood. Metal shutters began to slam down over the beautiful glass windows, sealing them into a steel tomb. Boom. An explosion rocked the foundation of the house. Dust rained down from the ceiling. Come with me, Co June snarled, dragging her toward the hidden door in the pantry. If you want to live, you do exactly what I say. You are not a prisoner anymore, Alina. He pulled a gun from the waistband of his trousers, the same sleek, suppressed pistol from the alley. He checked the chamber and looked at her, his eyes burning with a demonic intensity. Now, he said, you are the target. The world ended not with a whimper, but with the screech of tearing metal. The fortified shutters in the living room buckled inward, groaning under the assault of a shaped charge. The explosion that followed turned the air into a physical hammer, slamming Alina against the corridor wall. Her ears rang with a high-pitched whine that drowned out her own scream. Co June was there instantly, a shield of heat and hard muscle covering her body with his own. Dust and pulverized drywall rained down on them like gray snow. Move, he roared, the sound vibrating through his chest against her back. He hauled her up. The limp was gone, replaced by the terrifying, fluid mechanics of pure adrenaline. His wound had torn open, she could see the fresh bloom of crimson soaking through the bandages at his waist, but he moved as if pain was a concept he had decided to ignore. They ran. The house, her prison and sanctuary, was dying around them. Gunfire erupted from the upper mezzanine, the distinct clack-clack-clack of automatic weapons answering the deeper thud of heavy assault rifles. Min-Ho and the loyal guards were holding the line, buying time with their lives. The panic room. Alina gasped, stumbling over debris. The air tasted of copper and pulverized concrete. Compromised, Co June snarled, dragging her toward the heavy oak door of the library. They have thermal imaging. They know where the heat sources are. If we go into a box, we die in a box. He kicked the library door open and shoved her inside, locking it behind them. It was a temporary reprieve. The room was lined with books, floor to ceiling, a fortress of paper that offered zero protection against bullets. Co June moved to the massive mahogany desk and shoved it aside with a grunt of exertion that ended in a sharp hiss of pain. Beneath the rug was a trapdoor. Not a high-tech steel hatch, but old wood. The original foundation, he said, pulling it open to reveal a dark, narrow chute. Smugglers' tunnels from the 1950s. My grandfather used them to move gold. I kept them as a contingency. He turned to her, gripping her shoulders. His face was a mask of dust and blood, but his eyes were blazing. Listen to me. This tunnel leads to the drainage output, 2 miles down the mountain. There is a dirt bike stashed there. Keys are under the seat. Alina stared at him, the realization hitting her like a physical blow to the stomach. There's only one bike. Yes. You not coming. The explosion outside the library door shook the floorboards. Wood splinters flew inward. I see a not run, Alina, he said, gesturing to his bleeding side. I will slow you down. And someone has to hold the door. No. She grabbed his lapels, her hands shaking uncontrollably. No, you do not get to do this. You do not get to capture me and then die to make yourself the hero. I am not a hero. He shouted, shaking her once. The violence of it snapped her head back. I am the man who brought this to your doorstep. I am the reason they are here. This is my debt to pay. The library door hinges screamed. A boot kicked against the wood. Co June shoved a heavy black pistol into her hands. It was warm from his body. Take it. Safety is off. Point and pull. Now go. He pushed her toward the hole. Alina stumbled back, looking at the black abyss of the tunnel, then back at him. He had turned away, taking cover behind an overturned leather sofa, his suppressed pistol trained on the splintering door. He looked like a fallen king making his last stand, beautiful, lethal, and utterly doomed. She looked at the gun in her hand. It was heavy. Cold steel. "You play with a desperation that is captivating," he had said. "You are my silence." She realized then that the cage was not the glass walls. The cage was a life without the intensity he had forced into her veins. If she left now, she would survive. She would go back to her quiet, poverty-stricken life. She would play her cello. She would grow old. And she would be empty. The library door exploded inward. 2 men in tactical gear stormed in, weapons raised. Co. June fired. Thwip. Thwip. The first man dropped, his throat ruined. But the second man sprayed the room with bullets. Books exploded into confetti. Co. June ducked, but Alina saw him jerk, a graze to the shoulder. The attacker advanced, sensing blood. Alina did not think. She did not weigh the moral implications. Her body simply reacted. The somatic memory of Co. June's lessons, aggression, Alina, I want your anger, took over. She raised the heavy pistol, gripping it with 2 hands to steady the tremors, and stepped out of the shadows. "Hey!" she screamed. The attacker turned, surprised to see the fragile package standing her ground. Alina pulled the trigger. The recoil kicked hard against her palms, jarring her elbows. The shot went wide, shattering a bust of Beethoven. But it made the men flinch. It was enough. Co. June rose from behind the sofa like a specter. He fired once. Clean. Precise. The attacker collapsed. Silence rushed back into the room, ringing in Alina's ears. Co. June stared at her. For a second, he looked terrified. Then, furious. "I told you to go," he roared, limping toward her. "I missed," she said, her voice sounding hollow, distant. "I aimed for his chest, and I missed. You." He reached her, grabbing the gun from her limp hands and checking the chamber, then grabbing her face with his free hand. His fingers were bruising, desperate. "You stupid, reckless little fool. You could have been killed." "I'm not leaving you," she whispered. Her knees gave out, and she slumped against him. "If we die, we die. But I'm not going back to the silence." He stared down at her, his chest heaving against hers. The adrenaline was warring with the blood loss. He looked at the tunnel, then at the door, then at her. "Fine," he snarled. "Then we burn it all down." He pulled a small remote from his pocket. "The tunnel is not just an exit," he said, his voice dropping to that dangerous, low rumble. "It's a chimney." He dragged her to the edge of the trapdoor. "Jump. Now." This time, she did not argue. She dropped into the darkness. The slide was rough, tearing at her clothes, smelling of damp earth and mold. She hit the bottom hard, rolling into a puddle of freezing water. Co. June landed beside her a second later, groaning as the impact jarred his wounds. He did not waste time. He grabbed her hand and pulled her up. "Run," he commanded. "The gas lines are rigged to the ventilation system." They splashed through the knee-deep water of the tunnel. It was pitch black, guided only by the small tactical light on Co. June's gun. Above them, the sounds of the invasion were muffled but distinct. Heavy footsteps. Shouting. They were searching the library. "They inside," Co. June rasped. "Good." He stopped at a junction where the tunnel widened. He pressed the button on the remote. At first, nothing happened. Then, a deep, subterranean thump vibrated through the stone walls. It was followed by a roar, the sound of a dragon waking up. High above, the glass house, the architectural marvel, the prison, the fortress, erupted. The blast wave traveled down the tunnel, a rush of hot air that knocked them off their feet into the water. Dust poured from the ceiling. Alina covered her head, curling into a ball as the mountain seemed to groan in protest. When the shaking stopped, the silence was absolute. "Come," Co. June said. His voice was weaker now. "Not far." They limped the last half-mile. Alina had to support almost all his weight. He was cold, freezing cold. The heat that usually radiated from him was fading, replaced by the clammy touch of shock. "Stay with me," she begged, her arm wrapped around his waist, her hand pressing against the wet bandage. "Seo Jun, talk to me. Tell me about the cello. Tell me about the investment." "Bad investment," he slurred, his feet dragging in the mud. "Negative return on capital." "Shut up," she sobbed, laughing hysterically. "Just keep walking." They reached the metal grate at the end of the tunnel. Seo Jun kicked it open. The night air hit them, biting, freezing, clean. They stumbled out into the forest, miles below the house. Behind them, high up on the ridge, the night sky was stained orange. The glass house was a torch, burning against the snow. A funeral pyre for the life she had known. Seo Jun slumped against a pine tree, sliding down until he was sitting in the snow. His eyes were half closed. "Bike," he whispered, pointing vaguely to a brush pile. "Go." "We go," she corrected. She found the dirt bike. It was heavy, but panic gave her strength. She dragged it out. She got Seo Jun onto the back, tying his hands around her waist with his own belt so he would not fall off. She straddled the machine. She had never ridden a motorcycle. "Clutch, left," Seo Jun murmured against her ear, his head resting heavily on her shoulder. "Shift, up." She kicked the starter. The engine roared to life. "Hold on," she screamed into the wind. She gunned the throttle, and they tore off into the blackness of the forest, leaving the burning cage behind them. 6 months later the cabin sat on the edge of a fjord, where the mountains of Norway plunged violently into the ink-black sea. It was isolation made manifest. No roads led here, only a boat once a week for supplies. It was a different kind of silence. Not the sterile silence of the glass house, but a living silence. The sound of wind, of water, of seagulls. Alina sat on the wooden deck, the Guarneri cello between her knees. She played Bach. Suite No. 1 in G major. The prelude. It was a piece of beginnings, of flowing water, of sunlight. She played it differently now. The hesitation was gone. The apology for taking up space was gone. Her bow bit into the strings with authority, pulling a sound that was rich, dark, and utterly unapologetic. The sliding glass door opened. Daniel, formerly Kang Seo Jun, walked out. He walked with a cane now, a permanent souvenir of the bullet that had shattered his hip. The limp was severe, a hitch in his lethal grace. He wore a thick wool sweater and jeans, looking like a fisherman, save for the predatory alertness that never fully left his eyes. He stood by the railing, watching the gray water churn. "You rushing the tempo," he said quietly. Alina did not stop playing. She smiled, a small, secret thing. "I'm interpreting. There's a difference. Discipline creates freedom, Alina. And survival creates perspective, Daniel." She finished the phrase and let the bow rest. She looked up at him. The scars on his face from the tunnel debris had faded to thin white lines, but they were there. He looked older. Harder in some ways, softer in others. The monster had been broken and put back together, but some of the pieces were missing. He turned to look at her. The hunger was still there. It would always be there. He looked at her not as a possession, but as an anchor. The only thing keeping him tethered to the earth. "The boat comes tomorrow," he said. "The pilot says the weather is turning. We could go to the mainland. Seeing a concert in Oslo." Alina looked at the vast, empty horizon. She thought about the crowded streets, the noise, the people who did not know what it felt like to hold a gun and shoot at a man to save the person who had kidnapped them. She thought about the freedom of her old life, the poverty, the loneliness, the invisibility. Then she looked at the men who had burned his empire to ash just to keep her breathing. The men who had built a new cage, this one with the door unlocked, and dared her every day to walk through it. She stood up, setting the cello aside. She walked over to him, the wind whipping her hair across her face. She placed her hand on his chest, over the scar where the bullet had entered. She could feel his heart beating, steady, strong, and entirely hers. "No," she said softly. "I do not want to go to Oslo." He covered her hand with his. His skin was warm. "Are you sure?" The cage is open, Alina. She leaned up, pressing a kiss to the corner of his mouth. It tasted of salt spray and expensive coffee. I know, she whispered. That's why I'm staying. His arm went around her waist, pulling her flush against him. The somatic rush was still there, the sudden heat, the tightening of her chest, the thrill of being held by something dangerous that had decided to be gentle only for her. Play it again, he murmured against her hair. The Bach. Say please. He pulled back, his obsidian eyes glinting with a flicker of the old arrogance. Play it again. Or I will take you inside and make you forget the music entirely. Alina laughed. It was a free sound, bright and sharp in the cold air. Sit down, monster, she said, moving back to her chair. And listen. She raised the bow. The music swelled, filling the empty fjord, a testament to the price of silence, and the beautiful, terrible noise of being alive.